Hey gang, Uncle Josh here with another quick set of stories for you. I actually have volume 15 complete, just not produced. And I was sent one of these stories, and at the same time I came across another travel story, so I thought I'd put these together real quick before the next full volume. Check out these scary tales of travel from the US and beyond. And thanks to Melissa for letting me share her story from Vietnam. Check out her travel website, highheelsindabackpack.com, for more about her. Also, consider contributing to this page via my Patreon account. There's a link in the description below. You can donate as little or as much as you wish, and all of it helps to bring you ad-free content you won't hear anywhere else. So, sit back and let's go on a road trip together. Enjoy. My Rest Stop Story by Arctic Icicle. Back in 1997, I was traveling from Sandusky, Ohio to a little town in Nebraska called Alliance. My girlfriend's grandmother lived there, and we were going there to celebrate her 75th birthday. We had both just graduated from college, and she hadn't seen her Nana in a long time, so we thought it was going to be a great trip. Her parents were already there, so we were making the long trek to just spend a few days out with them. We left late in the morning on a nice July day, and were planning on stopping somewhere in Omaha for the night, and then getting to Alliance the next day. My girlfriend, now ex, let's call her Dana, hated driving my Cherokee for some reason, so I was doing all the wheel work. We were laughing and eating snacks and rocking out to the music on the radio. I remember my CD player had hooked up to the tape player broke not too long outside of Ohio. I was pissed, but Dana made me laugh about it, and we were just determined to have a good time. Besides, music back then was good, unlike the garbage that's out there now. Sorry, millennials, your music sucks. We were making good time, and it was around 10 or so when I needed to visit the little boy's room, and we found a rest stop outside of a town called Altoona in Iowa. The drive had been pretty dull. If anyone has driven in the Midwest, you know how flat and boring it is. Anyway, we pulled off the road. It was your typical rest stop, nothing fancy. There were no cars in the lot, and only one truck in the truck lot way down on the end. Dana and I got out and stretched a bit, and we both walked to the bathrooms. And that's when things started to get weird. There was a guy in the men's bathroom, just standing at a sink with his head down, and he was turning the water on and off. I thought it was strange, but just went to a stall to take care of the McDonald's that was running through me. Man, that shit is awful, and I can't believe I used to eat that. While I'm doing my business, I hear footsteps, and then see a pair of feet stop at my stall door. It was the weirdo, and he was so close to my stall door, the tips of his shoes were actually inside the stall. I could hear him breathing, and he knocked on the door but didn't say anything when I asked him what he wanted. He just stood there while I was getting creeped out. Then he sighed and said,
"No, she'll be juicier,"
and started walking away. I thought that it was odd, but then it kicked in. We were the only ones there. He was talking about Dana. I heard the outside door open and close, and, pardon the term, I just wiped my ass and ran out of the stall. When I left the bathroom, I saw the door closing to the women's bathroom, and I ran over to it. I'm not a huge guy, and I'm not going to lie and talk smack about how good of a fighter I am or some shit like people tend to do in these stories, but I flew in there to protect my girlfriend. When I got to the door, I heard her scream. He was standing a few feet inside the door staring at Dana with a kitchen knife in his hand. She was at a sink and screaming still as he blocked the doorway. He made a move towards her and didn't notice I was behind him, so I kicked out at his knee and he buckled. It was a solid shot, I will admit. The hand that held the knife hit the floor when he fell, and I'm not super proud, but I kicked him in the balls with all I had and yelled at Dana to run. She did, and the guy tried to grab her leg and said,
"Wait. No, wait."
I grabbed her arm and we ran out back to my Jeep. I didn't have a cell phone back then to call the cops, and I certainly wasn't going to stick around and use the payphone. I looked over and the truck was gone, so I knew that it wasn't his. I backed up and sped the hell out of there. Dana was crying and I was trying to make her feel better, but I was so jacked up I'm sure I wasn't good at it. When we got to Altoona, I went to a hotel right off the exit and asked the person at the desk to call the police for me. They met us there, and we told them about what had happened, and the police officer asked us where we were going, and if we could stick around for a little bit if we found something. And we said okay, and he went with another cop back to the rest stop. Dana was really upset, so the desk guy got us some water and let us sit in a break room. About 45 minutes later, the cops came back and asked us to look at a guy in their car. Dana said no way, but he said they would flash a light on him so that he couldn't see us looking at him. We finally did, and it was the same guy, except now he was wearing a woman's blonde wig and had makeup on his face. The cops had found him in the woman's room in a stall, and he had a bag with a couple of more knives in it, and children's clothing. It was messed up. They took our statement, and we got back on the road despite the nice guy at the hotel who offered us a discounted room. I just wanted gas and to get the hell out of that state. I ended up driving the next 8 hours to Alliance while Dana slept on and off. Dana and I are still friends, and every year around July she sends me a note on Facebook and says she'll never forget that night, and how that despite how things went sour between us later, I would always be her knight in shining armor for protecting her that night. Terror on the train. This happened almost 12 years ago. I was traveling back to Kerala from Guwahati, Assam, for my summer holidays. It was a long, really long 3 days and 3 nights trip to Kerala. I was traveling alone and I was excited. I was 16 and I loved long train rides. I really did. And here I was, about to spend 3 days and 3 nights alone on a train. What could possibly go wrong, right? At Rangia Station, about 40 kilometers from Guwahati, 3 men dressed in army fatigues boarded the train. They were Keralites, returning home for the holidays too, and we instantly hit it off. So here I was, innocent and docile me, with a few 40-year-old army men laughing and sharing stories and whatnot. What's so scary about that, right? Seemed like we were all having a good time. Yeah, fast forward a few hours. The sun set and the artificial lights kicked in on the coaches, and the men had changed into regular civilian clothes by now. And that's when one of them took out a bottle of rum and started handing out glasses to his buddies. Before we go any further, let me tell you what a sleeper coach looks like where I'm from. In each compartment, you have 2 berths on one side and 6 on the other, separated by a very narrow passageway. I was on the side with one of the men, while 2 other men were on the other side with 6 others. Wait, the numbers don't add up, do they? Well, these guys did not have confirmed reserve tickets, and thought of bribing their way or using their army card to get a seat. It's very difficult to get seats during holiday season, and there were absolutely no seats available for them. I felt bad and allowed one of the men to share my berth. Big fucking mistake. As the booze flowed, trash talk began increasing. There were 2 women in our compartment, a mother and a daughter, and I could see them fidget around very uncomfortably.
Don't worry, sweetheart,
one of them slurred at the daughter.
We don't do you no harm.
The poor girl's father kept whispering stuff into her ears, and probably something on the lines of just ignore them. One guy, in the process of leaning over to get some chips, accidentally spilled some of the rum on the girl's mother.
Whoopsie doodle,
he grunted.
Look what I done. Can I clean that up for you?
The woman just shut her mouth and shook her head in abject humiliation. A few nuns from the neighboring compartment figured out what the hell was going down at ours and came over and tried to restore some sanity. They weren't spared either. One of them went up to her and offered her rum, saying,
Come on, sister, there's plenty more where this came from.
Shit, there was more? I just wanted things to stop. Honestly, I was getting scared. I was not used to drunk middle-aged men hanging out around me. I did not know how to help these women in distress, and I did not know how to tell these guys to stop. I was 16. I lacked the balls to stand up to them. And I did not want a posthumous bravery award either. After 2 hours that seemed like 20, the men in uniform decided to call it a night. I was now sharing my berth, and the other 2 spread newspapers on the floor and crashed there. The lights went out, and the dim blue hue of the night lamps took over the compartment. I lay on my berth with the army man sleeping the other way, head to feet. My feet were at his head, and his feet were at my head. I couldn't sleep. I was tossing and turning with the little space that was available, and I finally ended up on my tummy. Just when I thought it was all over, I felt a hand creep up my leg. At first I thought it was an accident and jerked the hand off my leg. 10 minutes later, the hand crept up my leg again. Cha! I snapped and jerked it off again. There was calm for a few more minutes, but there was absolutely no fucking calm in my head. I was scared shitless. There was no way I could overpower this person. Skinny, scrawny me stood no chance against a heavy-set soldier. Please, no more, I prayed. Just when I thought it was done, he did it again. This time he grabbed me straight on my thigh, and he held it firmly in a powerful grip. There was no shaking that off. I didn't move. I was petrified. But I didn't move a muscle. I did not want him to know I was awake. His hand moved further up my thigh, creeping and grossing out every single cell in my body along the way. Was this how it felt to be molested? Was this how it felt to be raped? Fuck, I don't know. I didn't want to know, and I didn't want to hang around to find out. He had just gone under my shorts and had almost reached my underwear. And just as he was about getting into uncharted territory, or in this case, no man's land, I jerked my leg furiously with all the energy I could muster, and I kicked his face hard. Not once or twice, but as many times as I could. I was mumbling while I kicked and kicked as though talking in my sleep. In translation, it sounded like, "It's kind of fucked up, you won't even let me sleep properly." And then it stopped. No more hands. The next morning I woke up to the pleasant sight of this gentleman with his lips swollen and slightly cut. All of them got off at Malda Station and moved to a different coach, I presume. Fuck. What a trip. Motel 6 Ghost. A few years ago, my family was going to spend the 4th of July in St. Louis, Missouri, so my dad reserved a room at the Motel 6 not far from the city. When the 4th of July finally came around, my family, my father, mother, sister, and myself, traveled to St. Louis and made it to the Motel 6. We all waited in the truck as my father went in to check in. However, the clerk had told him that our reservation was not in the system. My father did not take well to this and demanded a room, because the Motel 6 was close to Six Flags and all the other motels were booked. The office clerk went through the listings about 3 times and said there was nothing. My father just continued to bug him, and finally the clerk said, "Well, we do have this one room, but it's handicapped. So what?" But then the guy told my father that strange things happened in the room, too. Dad didn't care. He was tired. It had 2 beds, so we took it. We got settled in and went to sleep. The next day we went to the St. Louis Arch and traveled around the city, too. My sister wore this one outfit that my mother bought her a couple of weeks ago. I think it was some type of skirt. We stayed out late to watch the fireworks that were shot off at the Arch, and then we went back to the motel. My parents and sister were tired. I wasn't. They went to sleep and I stayed up, sitting on the floor in front of my parents' bed watching TV. When a commercial came on, I looked around the room, first towards the bathroom, and then to the right. I saw a little girl. She looked a lot like my sister, short with long hair, but my sister wasn't as transparent as this girl. She stood up beside my sister, ran across the room towards the door in the corner, and fell to her knees, putting her hands over her face, and then she faded away. It was as if she was running scared from something or someone. With every step she took, the entire room vibrated, and you could hear the pounding on the floor. I looked up at where my sister was sleeping, and she was there, sawing logs. Then I jumped onto my parents' bed asking, "Did you see her? Did you see her?" Of course, they were asleep, so no, they didn't see anything. The next day, my mother was looking for a second outfit that she had packed for my sister. It was a dress with these ruffles at the bottom. Okay, though the little girl was somewhat transparent, I could still make out the outlines of her body and clothes just fine. She was wearing a dress with ruffles at the bottom. I remember that vividly. My mother looked and looked, but could not find the dress anywhere. She knew that she had packed it. That day we went to Six Flags, and I believe my sister had to wear the same outfit she had worn the previous day. She was none too thrilled. Well, several months later, at the funeral of my Aunt Joyce, God rest her soul, I told my entire family the story, and one of my cousin's friends came up to me and said that she had just told him about my ghost story. He told me he had grown up in that neighborhood where the Motel 6 was. but before it was located there, it was home to a housing complex. A little girl had been murdered along with her mother on the 4th of July after they had come home from a wedding. They had been wearing their fanciest dresses. My Scariest Travel Experience by Melissa. When asked if I have ever had any negative traveling experiences or felt unsafe, my answer has always been no, and I have assured that traveling strengthens your faith in mankind, which it does. But my recent experience with a cab driver in Vietnam has reaffirmed that sometimes bad things can happen when you travel, and has highlighted the importance of always being vigilant and aware of your surroundings. I woke up at 3 a.m. in Ho Chi Minh City to catch my 5:30 a.m. flight to Da Nang, in order to get my next stop off in Vietnam, Hoi An. I like the idea of a relaxing retreat in a picture postcard perfect town. I wanted to get to the airport in plenty of time, as my experience with domestic flights in Southeast Asia has not filled me with a lot of confidence. Of course, chaos ensued, and due to the disorganized way the check-in and security processes were managed, I found myself having to sprint to the gate. As I dashed down the broken escalator to board my flight, I hadn't noticed that some of the bottom steps were missing, so as I tried to make the final few, I lost my footing, and my foot hit a sharp piece of metal that was protruding up from the end of the escalator. Quite frankly, I've never seen so much blood. Blood was spurting out of my foot like it was the water fountain show at the Bellagio in Vegas. I couldn't bear to risk missing my flight, given how disorganized the whole airport system seemed to be, and I didn't want to seek first aid at the airport, and my own kit and bandages were at the bottom of my backpack. Thankfully, I was wearing Southeast Asian cliché Aladdin-style trousers, with little elephants on them and a floaty bottom, so I bunched up the material, wrapped it tight over my foot, and tucked it into my shoe. Rest in peace, trousers. The flight is surprisingly efficient and fast, but for me is spent trying to put pressure on my foot to stop the bleeding. Thank God for all those action movies I've watched teaching you to put pressure on wounds. When I arrived, I was able to wrap my foot in bandages, and it seemed to be doing a little better, so I took a cab to my hostel in An Bang. The driver couldn't find my hostel after driving around the streets multiple times. I told him it was fine and that I would try and find the place on foot. It was around 38 degrees centigrade and incredibly humid, so my search was conducted with a heavy plod as I tried to find the place. I showed the map and a picture of my hostel to the locals, who looked at me bewildered. They had never heard of this place. According to my GPS, it wasn't so far away, maybe a 10-minute walk, but the town is comprised of an intricate network of alleys and beach shacks. The road names on my map do not correlate with what I can actually see, since there are no actual road signs. I kept losing signal, and each local I asked pointed me in a different direction. Finally, I found a cab and showed my map and a picture of the hostel to the driver. "Ah, yes, I know that one," he assures me. I get in. I was exhausted from the heat, and he started driving towards the place. I sat back, took a sip of water, and slid into my seat in relief. I noticed he was approaching the town limits, which concerned me, so I asked him again if he knows where he's going. "Yes, of course I do," he snapped. But he sped right out of An Bang and started powering down the highway full steam ahead. Naive and still assuming he may not know the way, like driver 1, I tell him that he should head back, but he wouldn't listen. To cut a long story short, well, maybe not short, but a little shorter, after circling the area and accruing a crazy bill after much time arguing with this guy, he stopped by a random paddy field and tells me that this is where I was going. I disagreed, since I know my hostel is by the beach. An argument followed, and he tried to lock me in the cab. Since he wouldn't take me back to Ambang, I feigned an agreement and got out with my bags. Seemingly confident in my stupidity, he took his time getting out of the car, so I turned and ran as fast as I could through the paddy fields with him chasing me. "You! You!" he shouted over and over as he began sprinting after me through the fields. I didn't know if he was simply trying to scam me or harm me in a more sinister way. As he got closer, he tried to grab me, and I kept turning back to whack him away with my selfie stick. Thank God for selfie stick weapons. He tried his luck again, telling me to follow him back to the car in the hostel. I picked up my run again, I'm not sure how I managed in that heat with such a huge backpack. I mean, usually I'm panting and out of breath just running up my stairs, but I ran and ran and ran some more without looking back. I reached a Vietnamese man on the outskirts of a farm and tried to explain to him what happened, but he obviously didn't understand. The taxi driver was gone, and I felt sick with shock, and then the wound on my foot opened up again, and once again I'm covered in blood. I sit by the side of the road and try to get a hold of myself. My phone wouldn't pick up a signal out there, but I put out my map and figured that I can walk to Hoi An. A car pulled up. It was him again. He was dedicated, I'll give him that. You! You! He started yelling at the old man in Vietnamese. Obviously, I had no bloody idea what he was saying, but it was presumably something about me not paying, as the old man now looked disgruntled, and they both started coming towards me, so off I ran again. You! I call police! Police arrest you! The cab driver yelled. I was crying. He was laughing. Quite frankly, it was horrific. I got to the outskirts of Hoi An with him in tow. I was sprinting through the alleys, turning left, turning right, left, right, anything to try and lose him. I spotted a small outhouse, entered, and locked myself in amongst the tools. Surely he couldn't find me now. I had never been so terrified in my life. And maybe I blew it all out of proportion, I don't know, but from the horror stories I've heard about scams and corruption in Vietnam, the police can often be as corrupt as the locals. I was convinced that they would side with his argument over mine, that I had just bailed out of his cab without paying. I wondered if they were really looking for me, and if he had really called them. I wondered how persistent this guy was, and how long he would spend looking for me. 2 hours I waited in there, afraid to come out in case he was prowling around. I was hysterical. I realize maybe it sounds a little ridiculous now, but you know when you really start blowing things out of proportion and envisioning situations that will probably never happen? That was me in the moment. In my head, I was going to get dragged out by the police, that they wouldn't let me call the embassy or my parents, and I'd be in a Vietnamese jail for a few weeks, teaching the other women to sing like a virgin, like in Bridget Jones 2. After a few hours, I figured it was safe to leave. I ran into Hoi An Center and burst through the doors of a luxury hotel crying and covered in blood. I'm sure I looked quite a sight. I was thankfully met by a concerned American couple and the cheeriest front desk clerk I've ever seen, who all helped me call a cab back to Ambon. This story isn't intended to scaremonger, just to share my experience and the importance of always staying vigilant. I am always aware of my surroundings when I travel. And this was the middle of the day. I was not drunk. I had taken a reputable cab brand. But sometimes bad things do happen. And I'm sure a young woman alone seemed an easy target. This is not specific to Vietnam. I'm sure I could have just as easily encountered a creepy cabbie at home in the UK. Though it has brought it home to me that, as much as I think of myself as an independent woman, some places are safer than others. And some places are just easier to travel as part of a group. Hey gang, Uncle Josh here. Check out Melissa's travel blog. It's really great. She's been everywhere and makes me feel like a dink for not being outside of the States, except the British Virgin Islands. Yeah, and Canada doesn't count. Where I live, I can spit and basically hit Toronto. Anyway, check out her website, highheelsandabackpack.com. My First and Last Spring Break Trip by Christy Ann. Okay, this happened to me and my sister in spring of 2001. We were both juniors in college and decided to drive to Fort Lauderdale, Florida for spring break. We lived in Tennessee, so the drive overnight wasn't going to be so bad, at least that's what we thought. I hate saying this, and I know it's a humble brag, but we are both blessed to have a gorgeous mom and a good-looking father, and they both produce 3 very good-looking kids, my brother being the third. He's actually a model, but me and my sister, I'll call her Tammy for the story, are very pretty too. I'm sure everyone is going to hate me for saying that in the comments, but it's true and it plays a role in this story. Anyway, we left Lewisburg around 8 at night and figured with a couple of stops we'd be on the beach by noon the next day. Back then I had a Honda Civic that was super reliable, and my brother and I changed the oil and did other maintenance stuff to it before we left, so I had peace of mind. We were off into the night looking to meet up with some friends we met on vacation the year before, and yes, we were hoping to meet some boys. We split time driving and finally stopped at a place called Lake City to get gas and grab something to eat. And this is when the weirdness started. While I was pumping gas, my sister ran into the gas station / convenience store to get some drinks and snacks and was taking a long time coming back. I started wondering what was up and went inside and asked the guy at the cash register if he had seen Tammy. He said, "Blonde girl with a blue shirt?" I said, "Yeah," and he told me that she had went to use the bathroom out back but hadn't come back into the store. The bathroom was, in fact, around the back of the place. I mean, how fucking safe is that, right? Well, I went back there and saw 2 guys standing outside of the door that said bathroom on it. One was tall and the other guy was short with a bald head. Baldy was knocking on the door saying, "I know you're in there, cutie. Come on out and we can party." I knew Tammy was in there and they didn't see me, so I turned around and ran back to the store. I told the counter guy what was going on, and he in turn yelled to a coworker who was stocking some shelves. This guy was huge. Honestly, he looked like The Rock, I'm not kidding. They both went outside and told me to stay there at the counter. They came back a couple of minutes later with my sister and told me that they had yelled at the 2 creepers, but they ran off before they could do anything else. They didn't get a good look at them. Tammy was really upset and wanted to just get the hell out of there. I bought some chips and soda and things like that while the rock guy, let's call him Jason, asked me where we were headed, and I told him Fort Lauderdale for spring break. He said he was a student at the University of Florida and was actually going there in 2 days with some of his frat brothers. He asked for my number and I gave it to him, but I told him I didn't keep my cell phone on all the time. My dad paid for it and I wasn't supposed to use it too much. Tammy kept badgering me to go, but this guy was cute and I know she wasn't in any danger anymore, so I just told her to chill out. I guess I was being kind of a jerk. We got back on the road and made it to our hotel with Tammy sleeping most of the way. It really wasn't that long. We found, I'll call them Sherry, Tina, and Kim, at a cool restaurant and had brunch with mimosas, and then we got settled at our place with them. It was 5 of us in 2 hotel rooms with the door between them open, so it felt like we had more room than we really did. We didn't care. We were a block from the beach and ready to party. We laid out in the sun and walked around the beach that first day and met a lot of really cool people and had drinks and got tickets to these parties where everyone was just having a blast. On the second night, we got invited by these guys to go to a place called the Elbow Room, and it was a rager. My girls and I were dancing and meeting guys and just having a ton of fun when I got picked up from behind and I practically threw my drink out of my hand. It was Jason from the convenience store. At first, I was all scared because I was certainly not sober, but then when I saw it was him, I laughed and introduced him to my other friends. We partied all night, but Tammy got sick, so we took her home and promised Jason and his friends we would meet them tomorrow. I have to admit, I like Jason for not even really knowing him. He was a big guy, but he wasn't a moron and he was studying biology. I was a recombinant gene technology major, so we had things in common to talk about. Plus, he was super hot. The next day we all met at the beach, and Tammy was feeling pretty bad, so she just said she'd meet up with us later. Sherry and Tina hooked up with 2 of Jason's friends, and Kim was into girls and found this older woman with a lot of tattoos that she brought over to where we were hanging out. Jason and I talked all day and drank and then waded into the water past the waves to just stand and relax. He kissed me out there, and I thought this was the best vacation ever. Later that night, we went back to the Elbow Room, and Kim's friend, I'll call her Jen, brought this burly guy that looked like a biker with her, and I could tell it made Jason's frat brothers nervous. This guy looked rough as heck, but seemed to be really cool. This one guy, Brian, liked Sherry, and they were hanging out all night, and we said we'd get together again the next day. That night, the hotel room phone rang, and I answered it, and a voice asked to talk to Sherry. She was asleep, and I said so, and the guy said, "Listen, bitch, put her on the phone right fucking now." He then laughed this crazy laugh and hung up. I shook my head and tried to get back to sleep. 5 minutes later, the phone rang again. I answered it, and the same voice said, "Get Sherry right now or I'll fuck her in the ass." My eyes widened. I was no prude, but I was raised Baptist, and I wasn't used to anybody talking like that. "Stop calling here or I'll call the police," I said and hung up. The phone immediately rang again, and the guy said if I hung up again, we would all be raped and killed. I slammed the phone down so hard it woke everyone up, and I called the front desk to tell them what had happened. The man at the place told me he would call the police if something else happened, and to let him know if anything else went bad. About 10 minutes later, the phone rang again, and this time Tammy answered it. Her eyes got big before she slammed the phone down. "What happened?" I asked. "It was some guy that said he was going to do something to Sherry." I called the front desk and then took the phone off the hook. We were getting creeped out. The next day we were edgy and tired, but we went back to the beach and tried to have fun. Jason and his friends showed up, and we did have a good time, and they invited us back to their friend's house for a party that night. I trusted Jason and this other biker guy that kept hanging around us. We went to the party and got pretty drunk. I lost track of my friends and was just hanging out with Jason when Kim came running over to where we were sitting at the pool. "Come quick," she said. "What's up? What's wrong?" I asked. She replied, "Something is wrong with Sherry and she won't open the door." We got up and ran into this big house and up some stairs. In one of the rooms there was some loud music playing and some guys laughing. I pounded on the door and it opened a crack, but then it shut quickly. Jason then really pounded on the door and it opened again, and a guy said, "Oh, hey, it's you, bro." Jason pushed the door open. I screamed. There was a guy who was naked on top of Sherry, and another guy had Tammy in his lap in a chair. His hand was over her mouth and his hands were down the front of her jean shorts, and she was trying to get away from him. Her makeup was all smeared and she was crying. There were two other guys in the room just watching what was happening, and Jason ran over to my sister and pulled her away from this frat brother. Then he swung at the guy on top of Sherry. We later found out she'd been roofied. But the two other guys jumped on Jason and started punching and kicking him. Kim was screaming, I was screaming, my sister was screaming, and then suddenly the biker guy showed up and just picked up one of the guys and threw him into the wall. Jason got up and they both fought like animals while we were just screaming. Finally, we were able to get my sister and Sherry out of the room when I noticed who the two other guys were. They were the same guys that were at the gas station. The guy named Brian was the one on top of Sherry trying to, do what he said he was going to do on the phone. We ran out of the house, and it turns out Jason knew those guys, but he didn't know they were the ones at the store. Or that's what he said. We got out of there with the help of the biker guy and got back to our room. We were all crying in a mess and just wanted to go home. But I said we needed to call the police, and we did, told them everything that had happened, and gave them the address of the house. I guess a bunch of people at the party got arrested, including Jason. He tried calling me from jail, but I didn't answer. I know he didn't do anything wrong, but just being friends with those guys made me not want to be around him at all. All of us went home earlier than we were planning, but none of us wanted to be there anymore. Jason tried to call me a couple of times, but it wasn't until about 10 years ago that he found me on Facebook and I actually talked to him. He had been kicked out of his fraternity for how he beat up his brothers, and then he transferred to a different school. He still insisted that he didn't know anything about those guys and really didn't understand that they were the two outside of the gas station. Tammy wouldn't say anything about what happened that night, and neither did Sherry. Nothing ever came of it, and those assholes got away with it. For anyone wanting to rip us apart for our decisions, stifle it. We were stupid kids that made some bad decisions, and all I can say is you can use this as a lesson to never do the same thing. If you ever go to spring break, or anywhere for that matter, be careful. Don't drink too much, and certainly don't just trust anyone. Pay attention to your surroundings, stay close to your friends, and be safe. Thanks for listening, gang. Volume 15 will be coming at you soon, but I hope you like this collection of creepy travel tales in the meantime. Please follow me on social media. Links to those outlets are in the description below. And be sure to check out my Patreon page and learn about how you can support the channel and get some great perks like unreleased content and more. Take care, and I'll be talking with you real soon. Until then, remember, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.